Hello everyone. Today Rajbir and I will be presenting on the topic of iPad-based PECS applications, and we'll be presenting two separate articles looking at two different populations. So the first article is the effects of an iPad-based speech generating device infused into instruction with the PECS system for adolescents and young adults with severe autism spectrum disorder. So what would the social significance be of a study such as this one? Speech generating devices give learners without the ability to communicate a way to express themselves and mimic the typical conversation that would be back and forth between two speaking individuals. This also builds technological skills, which are becoming increasingly important in the modern day. The iPad programs are said to be easier to implement, affordable. Learners may feel more motivated. There are studies that suggest that motivation is increased with these iPad interventions. And portability. So the summary of Article 1, there was 3 participants aged between the ages of 14 to 23 with little to no functional speech, all level 3 autism severity. And then that's the explanation of the application. And the goal of the application was to provide these nonverbal participants a way to communicate using a new technology and also inspire natural speech production. They used a multiple baseline design. The research in this article aimed to evaluate the effectiveness of this particular application in regards to requesting / manning skills and the effectiveness of actually inspiring speech production. They wanted to examine those concurrent effects for speech production, investigate generalization of learned skills, and also evaluate the maintenance of those skills after a period of time without intervention, which was 4 to 6 weeks. Independent variables were the iPad intervention, which is the application that follows traditional PECS standards. The intervention took place in a university-based speech and hearing clinic twice a week for 30 to 40-minute sessions. The participants did not receive other speech therapies or language services during the study to avoid any confounding variables that might exist. Here we are. Each visit, the participants had 1 to 2 sessions of 20 trials each, with a break in between. Okay, and the dependent variables are requesting and natural speech production. So these were what was being measured. Again, the intervention. About the application was called SpeakAll, and some benefits were that they randomized the location of the symbols on the screen to prevent rote responding. And then here is an image depicting the application. I'll just quickly go through some participant profiles. Our first participant was Isaac. He had some self-injurious behavior, a little bit of sign language for manning purposes, some intentional vocalizations prior to the study, and none of the participants had experience or sufficient experience with PECS systems or an iPad. Steve, again, level 3 autism severity, just like all the other participants. He showed aggression towards self and others, including self-injurious behavior, little to no functional speech, and Mike. So same thing, level 3. He had only the manual sign for please, otherwise he had no other method of communication, and no other therapy was conducted during the study. So the reinforcement. The researchers started off with a preference assessment before conducting baseline intervention and so on. So the preference assessment had 2 stages. The first stage was parental interviews, where the parents listed 6 to 8 different reinforcements or preferred items of the child. And then in stage 2, that was the trial-based assessment. 1 item at a time was presented to the child, and a rater scored whether or not the child interacted with the item within 5 seconds. And the item chosen 80% of the time or higher was selected as the preferred reinforcement. So this is a list of the reinforcers that they needed. Of course, they used both edibles and toys were later used in the maintenance phase, but the study mainly uses edibles, the intervention. So for baseline, 1 preferred edible was placed in front of the learner but slightly out of reach. They had the iPad in front of them with the corresponding symbol on the iPad. So there were 20 trials, so 20 response opportunities for the learner. Every 5 trials, the learner had the ability to change the edible, and every 10 trials, the edible was removed and replaced for a different reinforcer, just to remove chances of over-selectivity. Okay, and regardless of whether the learner used the iPad to request or not, the trainer did provide that reinforcement. No prompting or praise was used. Isaac had a baseline requesting repertoire of 0 and 5.2 intentional vocalizations. Steve was 0.33 requests per session and 0 speech production, and Mike was 0 in both categories. The intervention used PECS phases 1 through 5, and in stages 1 to 3, some of the key points are that there is 1 communicative partner and 1 prompter. There's a distinct prompting, reinforcement, and error correction, which is used throughout the intervention. Phase 4 is defined mostly by building sentence structure. That is the main goal and focus. Phase 5 uses a delayed prompting strategy, and this is mostly to encourage natural speech production. Yes, okay. And then the goal of phase 5 is to facilitate answering direct questions and commenting. The modified PECS protocol taught the participant to use the iPad to respond specifically to the phrase, "What do you want?" by connecting the I want symbol and the preferred item, similar to an I want strip. They moved from full physical prompt to partial, and then a gestural prompt. For generalization, immediately following those intervention, 3 probes of generalization were conducted, and they aimed to test the generalization of requesting for untrained items. So those are those toys that we discussed earlier. They use the same 20 trial format as the intervention, and every request initiated through the iPad was documented. For maintenance, after a period of 4 to 6 weeks, the participants were returned to the clinic, and in that same 20 trial format again, they had 3 maintenance sessions per participant. So the IOA data, the inter-observer agreement, all sessions were video recorded, and then a random 70% of those sessions were selected to be reviewed by 2 independent observers. They had a 100% IOA for requesting and 98.6 on speech production. So here's our graph. The top one is Isaac. It shows baseline, very, very little requesting behaviors. These are all specifically on the requesting variable. Then phase 1, and you see as he reaches mastery criteria, moves along the phases. Generalization, he has it mastered, and by the maintenance period, he's also mastered. And then the other 2 boys had similar patterns. However, neither of them were able to make it to phase 5. And then this is the speech production. Again, Isaac was the only one to produce speech, and he had that ability before coming in. Okay, so the results. He went from baseline, he went from 0 to request, and then to 16.5 during intervention, 17 during maintenance. And then his vocalizations tripled by phase 5. Baseline for Steve, 0.38 requests per session, and then during 1 and 2, 10.3. And then as soon as they began introducing 3 or more symbols, Steve was not able to discriminate between those variables, so he was not able to move on. And then during the maintenance trial, he had 16.3 requests. Mike, 0 requests at baseline, and then 9.75 per session. And then Mike actually had the same issue with discriminating between the stimuli. Maintenance showed a 12.3 requesting behavior per session. Results: all 3 participants showed a significant improvement in requesting behaviors. However, there isn't evidence to suggest that this application in particular promotes speech production. The participants benefited from the speech generating application and built their manding repertoire. The research concluded it may be a better strategy if they introduce a traditional PECS and then move on to a PEC system that is based on an iPad when the learner has more vocabulary. But they did recommend starting with the traditional PECS. The core principles that were identified in this article were technological, behavioral, and applied, which is discussed further in our paper. Thank you very much.